The A3 is a super clean looking micro ATX case from InWin, and in my opinion looks really nice. But is it any good? Let's find out. What's up everyone, Erik here and welcome to Hardware for Gamers. For those of you who are new to the channel, I test and review PC cases, CPU coolers, PC case fans, and video cards. Now before I get on to the overview, to have full disclosure, InWin did send me over this case to test and review, but as always, all opinions expressed in this video are mine. So if you end up liking the video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because it does help out a lot. Now starting with a quick look from InWin's A-series lineup. The smallest case in this series is the A1 or the A1 Prime, which is only 16.6 liters in size and is sold with an included power supply. The step up from the A1 is the A3. This is a micro ATX mini tower case and comes in black or white. Then you have the A5, which is the mid-tower option, which has an MSRP of 105 USD, and again comes in black or white. Okay then, now that we know a little about the A-series lineup, let's take a look at the A3. The dimensions are 34.7 centimeters high by 21.5 centimeters wide by 40.1 centimeters deep. The A3 comes with an accessory bag with all the screws and fittings. There are also some zip ties, a graphics card support bracket, a 4-pin PWM extension cable, an ARGB 5050 extension cable, a business card with a QR code to the manual, which is cool to see, and I wish more manufacturers actually did this rather than including a full copy of the manual. Looking back at the case, the A3 has a solid steel front panel. This panel cannot be removed. It is riveted to the chassis. Not really anything else to talk about here, so I'll turn the case around to look at the rear. There is an AC plug along the top. We see the rear I/O location and a pre-installed 120mm ARGB fan. The A3 has 4 horizontal expansion slots, 2 with reusable covers and 2 with break-off covers. And that's it for the rear of the case, so on to the bottom of the case. There are 4 plastic feet. These feet give 27mm of ventilation. The feet do have rubber pads on them to help stop the case from sliding around. There is a removable dust filter along the bottom of the case. You access this filter from the front of the case. Looking at the bottom of the case without the filter, we can see mounting for 2 120mm fans and a spot to mount a storage drive. Moving on to the right side of the case, there is a steel panel. This side panel is completely toolless. It's held in by 2 plastic nubs. To remove the right side panel, all you need to do is pull the top of the panel away from the chassis, then tilt the panel back and lift it away. This panel is just a bent sheet of steel with some good sized grooves, so it does feel quite rigid. Moving on to the left side of the case, the left side panel is glass. Like the right side panel, the glass panel is completely toolless and is removed in the same way. The glass is 3mm tempered glass with a pretty dark tint to it. Finally, moving to the top of the case, this is where we find the front I/O. There is a USB 2.0 Gen 2 2x2 Type-C port, an audio combo port for the front audio out and microphone. There are 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type-A ports, as well as a power button. The top of the case is also a panel. This panel is also held in by plastic nubs. To remove this panel, the left side panel must be removed first. Then slide the top of the panel to the left side of the case, and then lift the panel away. The front I/O is attached to the chassis, so there is no need to worry about damaging any of the cables when removing the top panel. The top panel is plastic with a plastic mesh. This mesh should act like a dust filter. Taking a look at the top of the case without the top panel, we see mounting holes for 2 120mm fans, as well as the power supply location. And that's it for the exterior of the case. Now before I move on to the interior of the case, if you like what I'm doing here, can you please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel? And if you really like what I'm doing here, can you please support the channel by using my Amazon Associates link? It is in the description. All you need to do is click on the link for your location and then add an item or items to your cart and order them. and the channel will get a small kickback at no extra cost to you. Now, looking at the inside of the case. On the left side of the case, there is a bracket that is meant to support / hide the power supply. You remove this bracket by unscrewing 2 screws, one along the top and one along the bottom. This bracket is also designed to hold the graphics card support holder. Moving on to the motherboard tray, there's not too much going on here. There's standoff support for ITX and micro-ATX motherboards. There's a large cutout in the motherboard tray, so accessing any M.2s on the backside of your motherboard once it's installed should be pretty easy. There are also cutouts for the EPS and CPU fan cables. There is a large open space along the front of the case. Although most of the space will be taken up by the power supply, there should be enough room to run / hide a fair number of cables here. Okay, the A3 supports ITX and micro-ATX motherboards. With power supplies shorter than 170 millimeters, the maximum GPU length is 370 millimeters. With then a power supply longer than 170 millimeters, the max GPU length is then cut down to 280 millimeters. Finally, the max CPU cooler height is 162 millimeters. Okay, time to turn the case around and take a look at the backside of the motherboard tray. You can fit up to 3 drives in this case. That's either 3 2.5-inch drives or 2 3.5-inch drives and 1 2.5-inch drive. Now, InWin gives you a very generous 35 millimeters behind the motherboard tray for running cables and one of those 3.5-inch drives, but there are absolutely no tie-offs on the backside of the motherboard tray. Okay then, moving on to the cooling options of the A3. Its stock configuration has one 120 millimeter fan at the rear, but the chassis can support up to 5 120 millimeter fans. That's 2 along the top, 2 along the bottom, and 1 at the rear. Now, sadly, the A3 does not support 140 millimeter fans. For radiator support, you can have only one 140 millimeter rad along the top. Well, that is it for the overview. However, before I get onto my build notes, if you are finding this video helpful, you may also want to check out some of my other case reviews. I'll have a card above to the playlist, and I'll also have it linked down in the description. Plus, if you are appreciating all the work that I'm doing here, then please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. 100% of what I receive goes towards buying products to review. A link is in the description. Okay, my build notes. There's really not too much to talk about here. Everything went pretty straightforward. It was very easy to build in. The non-modular power supply and all the cable extensions fit, or at least I was able to get them to fit. The way the power supply needs to be mounted has it in the system or facing towards the system, so the power supply is acting as an exhaust. Now, I did or do have an OCD issue with this case. Those of you who watch a lot of my videos probably already know where I'm going with this, and that's that there are no tie-offs on the backside of the motherboard tray. You can get a lot of cables in behind the motherboard tray, it's just not in and tight to the motherboard tray. All the cables are all just kind of there, and my OCD doesn't like that. Some of you might care about this as well, but I'm pretty sure most of you won't. I'm just pointing it out so everyone understands that it will be a wad of cables back there. I did also install the GPU support bracket. Now, obviously for my card, it's certainly not necessary, but for some of those big boy cards, it is a nice addition to have. Now, again, because of the compact form of this case, I don't know if it really makes that much sense for the A3, but for something like the A5, where you can actually get a much larger cooler in there, or like GPU cooler, it then starts making a lot more sense. Moving on to the pre-installed fan. It is an InWin Mercury AM120S fan. The max rated RPM is 2000. The minimum rated RPM is 400. There are 9 blades, but all the blades are connected, so it's more like a video card fan concept. I've never actually seen a case fan designed quite like this. The bearing type is a long lifespan sleeve bearing. The connector, there are 2 connectors. There is a 4-pin PWM fan connector with a daisy chain, as well as the 3-pin 5-volt ARGB 5050 connector, again with a daisy chain. And that's it for my build notes, so on to the temperature testing. If you have any questions on how I test the cases, please check out my case testing methodology video. I'll have a card above, and I'll also have it linked in the description. Now, before I get into the charts, I just wanted to point out again that the power supply is turned into the system, so it is acting as a second exhaust fan for the stock configuration. So taking a look at the CPU workload temperatures first. So the stock fan running at full speed had the average steady state CPU temperature at 69C. Very nice. Then I added 2 P12 fans to the bottom of the case, and that had the average steady state CPU temperature go up to 69.6C, which is within the margin of error of just the stock fan. But then I added 2 more P12 fans along the top, as well as still having those 2 P12s along the bottom, and the average steady state CPU temperature went down to 66.8C. So not really too much of a temperature difference between any of these configurations. Looking at the game temperatures now, with the stock fan running at full speed, the average CPU temperature was 46 Celsius, and the average GPU temperature was 64.4 Celsius. Then when I added the 2 P12 fans to the bottom of the case, the average CPU temperature was 46.5 Celsius, and the average GPU temperature went down to 63.2 Celsius. Then with the 2 P12 fans along the top, the 2 P12 fans along the bottom, and the stock fan, the average CPU temperature was 44.3 Celsius, and the average GPU temperature went down to 60.8 Celsius. So adding in those 2 top fans as exhaust really did help the system get rid of all that hot air. Now comparing the A3 to the other cases I've tested, its stock sound level is on the louder side with a dBA of 39.8. Moving on to the stock CPU workload test, the A3 is in between the 4000D Airflow and the R1 Pro. In the game testing, the A3 is topping the chart by a fair bit for the GPU temperatures anyway, but when comparing the CPU temperatures, it would land somewhere in the middle. Moving on to the noise equalize testing. So having all the cases noise equalized to 35 dBA or running at full speed if they don't reach 35 dBA. In the CPU workload test, it's again pretty much in the middle of the chart with a temperature of 70.5 Celsius. For the noise equalized game testing, the A3 is again topping the chart for the GPU temperature with a temperature of 66.4 Celsius, but would be on the bottom half of the chart for the CPU temperature with a temperature of 47.4 C. Moving on to the fan normalized testing, the sound level of the A3 with the 4 Arctic P12 fans was 40.5 dBA, which does have it near the bottom of the chart. In the CPU workload test, the A3 is near the bottom of the chart with a temperature of 67.5 Celsius. Then in the fan normalized game testing, the A3 again is on the top of the chart with an average GPU temperature of 61.9 Celsius and an average CPU temperature of 45.3 Celsius. So what do I think of InWin's A3? Simply put, it's a really nice micro ATX case. It's well engineered, its temperatures are good. Actually, the GPU temperatures are really good. Apparently, blasting the GPU with a whole bunch of fresh air can get you some pretty good GPU temperatures. And the CPU temperatures are okay. I don't know how comfortable I would be putting a 13900 KS in there, but other than that, your CPU options are pretty open. Personally, I have a few minor issues with the case, primarily that there are no tie-offs on the backside of the motherboard tray. I know most people aren't going to really care about that, but again, that is personally. My OCD just really doesn't like that. Now again, cutting down on the cable extensions and things like that will make closing the back panel really simple. And again, depending on how many drives and stuff you want to put in here. I know there are other people like me that have OCD issues with cable management, so just beware. If you care about that type of thing, you've been warned. But there is also, personally speaking again, I don't like that there is a very dark tint to the tempered glass, because it does take a lot of RGB to actually see through that glass into the case. And again, I don't know if that's an OCD issue for me, but I just don't like darkly tinted glass. It just makes it so that you can't really see into the case. So when you do all that nice work and you can't see it unless you have a whole bunch of RGB splashing everywhere, it doesn't really make sense to me to have the glass. So it's intended to, I guess, have a lot of RGB in there so you can see stuff. I don't then really like RGB, again, personally. Now, something I would really like to see for this case would be a dual metal panel version, and to then have that as like a home theater PC option, because that would, like, if you go put that in your living room with 2 metal panels and just sitting there, it would be clean AF, and most people wouldn't even understand it's a computer. They would just think it's a subwoofer, if even that. Because, like, how clean the front of this case is, and if you just like sit that in your as a home theater PC, dude, clean as f***. It'd be so nice. Now, looking at the price, the MSRP of 90 USD for what you get is pretty okay. Now, stock for this thing at time of filming is pretty much non-existent, so please just don't buy from third-party sellers that are jacking up the price stupidly. Now, I would hope by early spring, supply should be pretty much good enough that you can go anywhere or look anywhere and be able to find it for MSRP, if not lower than MSRP. But yeah, just don't buy from third-party sellers that are jacking up the price for stupid reasons. And that's all I got for this one. So if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're still watching and you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon so you get notified whenever I drop a new video. There's also the HFG Discord server. It is completely free to join. All you need to do is agree to the server rules and you can then get to view all of my charts. A link is in the description. There's also Patreon. If you want to support the channel directly, again, a link is in the description. You may want to check out this right here. It'd probably be a link to all my case reviews. And as always, thank you very much for watching and see you next time.